August 19th, 1944, 6:40 hours. Outside true Normandy. The smell hits first. Not cordite. Not blood. Wine. You can almost taste it in the damp morning air as British tank engines idle, their exhausts coughing softly in the hedgerows. The guns have gone quiet, here too quiet. Just hours ago, this stretch of Normandy shook under artillery fire as the jaws of the Falaise pocket snapped shut. Now, birdsong creeps back in, uncertain, as if even nature is checking whether the killing is truly over. Captain Arthur Tommy Reynolds of the 11th Armored Division dismounts from his Cromwell tank and steps into churned mud that still glistens with rain and oil. His boots sink. He swears under his breath. 3 weeks of non-stop fighting operation, Bluecoat, the breakout. The pursuit of ground his men down to something raw and exhausted. Faces hollow, eyes red, uniforms stiff with sweat and dirt. Ahead of him, a German position lies abandoned. From above, it looks like nothing. A low concrete lip half hidden by nettles. A steel door hanging open, bent outward by a demolition charge that never quite finished the job. Reynolds raises a hand, signaling his men forward. Rifles up, slow, careful. You expect the smell of death down there. Instead, warm air drifts up from the darkness below. Dry, heated. A corporal flicks on a torch and descends the concrete steps. The beam sweeps across whitewashed walls. Clean walls. Tick clean. Rendell follows, ducking instinctively, heart pounding despite himself. He's seen German fieldworks before, crudely dug foxholes, mud-filled bunkers, lice-ridden trenches, hastily reinforced with timber and desperation. This is not that. The bunker opens into a long underground corridor reinforced with poured concrete and steel beams. Electric wiring runs neatly along the ceiling. Actual wiring. Still live. Light switches line the wall. Someone flips one. The lights come on. For a moment, no one speaks. The room is carpeted, not rags, not blankets thrown over dirt. A carpet red, threadbare in places, but unmistakably a carpet. Against the wall sits a wooden table with chairs pulled neatly beneath it. A shelf holds empty wine bottles, French vintages, labels intact. A radio set hums quietly in the corner, headphones resting beside it as if the operator has just stepped out for a smoke. A heater ticks softly, radiating warmth into the underground chamber. Bloody hell, someone whispers. You can feel the disbelief spreading through the group like an electric current. These men have slept in flooded, slit trenches. They've eaten cold rations under shell fire. They've gone weeks without dry socks. And here is a bunker that feels less like a battlefield position and more like a hotel cellar. Reynolds moves deeper. There are bunks, bunks with mattresses, sheets, even pillows. A messery is stocked with canned food stacked neatly in crates. Loaves of bread gone stale but untouched. A cabinet containing porcelain plates. Real cutlery, not tin, not improvised. Silverware. One of the tank troopers laughs, sharp and brittle, while we were freezing our backsides off. The sentence trails away unfinished, because now the implication settles in. These weren't rear area. This bunker sits less than 2 miles from the front line. German troops had been fighting and retreating from this position just days ago, maybe hours. And while British soldiers clawed survival out of mud and rain, their enemy had been sleeping on mattresses, listening to the radio, warming themselves underground. The contrast is obscene. Reynolds steps into a side room and stops. Short, on the wall hangs a framed photograph. A German officer in dress uniform, smiling beside a woman and 2 children. On the desk below it lies a leather-bound notebook, a fountain pen, a chessboard mid-game. This wasn't just a fighting position. It was a home. Outside, the wider battle rages on. The Falaise pocket is collapsing. Tens of thousands of German soldiers are trapped, trying desperately to escape east while Allied artillery pounds the roads into rivers of wreckage. The 11th Armored Division has been driving hard, cutting off escape routes, overrunning positions so quickly the enemy often flees without destroying their own facilities. But none of the briefing notes mention this. No intelligence summary prepared them for what they'd find underground. Word spreads fast. More British troops descend into the bunker complex. Each room brings a new shock. A small infirmary stocked with medical supplies. Shelves of books. A phonograph with records stacked neatly beside it. Even curtains, hanging absurdly at the entrance to a sleeping alcove. You can almost feel the anger building now. Not loud, not explosive. Something colder. A sergeant runs his hand over the carpet, shaking his head. They were living better than we were, he mutters. in France. And that's when the question begins to form quietly, dangerously in minds of the men standing there. If this is what the Germans built for themselves, what else have they been hiding beneath the earth? Because this bunker, this pocket of comfort amid chaos, is not unique. And as the British push deeper into the ruins of the German defensive system, they're about to uncover a truth that will force them to reevaluate not just the enemy's engineering, but the mindset of the army they've been fighting all along. The shock is only beginning. The bunker doesn't empty when the last British soldier leaves. It lingers. The smell of warm concrete, the echo of boots on clean floors, the memory of comfort in a place built for war. As the 11th Armored Division pushes onward, the discovery travels with them past from crew to crew, tank to tank, like an unsettling rumor you can't quite shake. By midday, more German positions fall, and again, each one tells the same story. Near Chamboy, a troop from the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment stumbles upon another underground complex, carved deep into a wooded slope. The entrance is camouflaged with branches and netting, so effective that Allied reconnaissance aircraft never spotted it. From the air, it was just another patch of Norman countryside. Below ground, it's something else entirely. You descend narrow steps and feel the temperature change instantly. Cool, controlled. Dry. Electric lights flicker on, revealing walls painted pale gray, floors swept clean. Maps of the battlefield are pinned with careful precision. Units marked in red and blue pencil. Timetables. Supply schedules. This isn't improvisation. This is planning. The men move room to room, cataloging what they find. Radios tuned to multiple frequencies. Field telephones connecting bunker to bunker through buried cables. Diesel generators with spare fuel drums neatly stacked. Rations, real rations, still sealed in crates. Wine again. Always wine. One corporal picks up a bottle and reads the label aloud. Bordeaux, 1938. You've got to be kidding me. Outside, British infantry are still sleeping in shallow foxholes, their greatcoats soaked from last night's rain. Tank crews brew tea on engine blocks and scrape dried mud off periscopes. The contrast is impossible to ignore now. This is no accident. Of fortune. This is doctrine. German defensive theory for Verteidigung. Defense in depth had emphasized hardened positions, layered fallback lines, and protection from artillery and air power. But what British troops are seeing goes beyond military necessity. These bunkers weren't just designed to survive bombardment. They were designed to sustain morale, to make life underground bearable, even comfortable. You can almost feel the resentment creeping in. A sapper from the Royal Engineers crouches near a heater, warming his hands, his face hardening as the realization settles. They planned to sit this out, he says quietly. Let us rot above ground while they waited below. The truth is more complex but no less bitter. German troops, especially officers and technical units, were often allocated far better facilities than their Allied counterparts. Concrete, steel, insulation, power. It reflected a belief that the war would be long, that survival meant endurance, and that preserving command staff was essential at all costs. British doctrines, by contrast, emphasized mobility and adaptability. Dig in fast, move fast, live rough. Comfort was secondary to momentum. The men had accepted that. What they hadn't accepted was the idea that the enemy had been fighting the same war from an entirely different physical reality. The effect on morale is strange. Some laugh it off. Dark humor, masking irritation. Others pocket souvenirs, bottles, chess pieces, a German officer's scarf. A few simply sit in silence, absorbing the unfairness of it all. Lieutenant James Carter, infantry attached to the armor, writes in his diary that night. We sleep in shell scrapes. They slept in bedrooms. Makes you wonder what else we never saw. And that question, what else, becomes louder as the pocket tightens, as Allied forces close in. The roads east of Falaise, clogged with German columns attempting escape. Horse-drawn, wagons, trucks, armored vehicles all smashed together under constant air attack. The sky belongs to the Allies now. Typhoons scream overhead, rockets slashing into traffic jams that stretch for miles. From above, the German army looks broken, but underground, the story is different. Signals intelligence soon reveals that many German headquarters escaped the worst of the bombing because they were buried deep beneath the soil. Commanders issued orders from reinforced bunkers, while frontline troops died in open fields. The luxury the British stumbled upon wasn't indulgence, it was insulation from reality. And that creates a new, uncomfortable understanding. The enemy wasn't just well equipped, They were sheltered from weather, from fear, from the constant vulnerability that defined the Allied soldiers' experience as night falls. British units take shelter where they can. Some men, against regulations, choose to sleep inside the captured bunkers. For the first time in weeks, they lie on something soft. They listen to the hum of generators instead of shellfire. But sleep doesn't come easily, because comfort, once tasted, raises questions that are hard to ignore. If German officers had been living like this, what did they know that the men in the mud did not? And more importantly, what happens to an army when its leaders fight a different war than its soldiers? The answer waits deeper inside the Falaise pocket. The night is unnaturally quiet. Inside the captured bunker, a British tank crew sleeps in shifts. The heater hums. A single bulb casts its yellow glow over concrete walls that still smell faintly of tobacco and polish. Above ground, the battlefield lies under a thin veil of mist, the air heavy with smoke and the distant thunder of artillery rolling east. You can almost feel the disconnect. This bunker was never meant to be quiet. Not like this. It was designed for voices, for orders barked into field telephones, for radios crackling with updates from the front, for the controlled urgency of a war managed from beneath the soil. Now, it's silent. At dawn, Captain Reynolds steps outside and watches the fog lift. Beyond the hedgerows, German vehicles burn along the road of WWII. Black columns of smoke rise straight into the morning sky. The Falaise pocket is nearly sealed, and suddenly the luxury underground feels hollow. As British units advance, they begin to understand what these bunkers truly represent. Not strength, but a bet. A belief that engineering and planning could outlast enemy firepower. That concrete could compensate for strategic reality. German commanders had invested immense resources into these underground complexes. Labor, steel, time. They were meant to anchor defensive lines, to absorb bombardment, to give officers a stable environment from which to direct battle. But war had moved faster than concrete could. You walk through another bunker complex near Montoromol, and the pattern is impossible to ignore. Maps on the walls are outdated. Markers haven't been moved in days. Orders written on chalkboards, reference units that no longer exist. The Germans didn't abandon these bunkers because they wanted to. They abandoned them because the front outran them. Speed defeated steel. British intelligence officers begin piecing together the implications. Reports flow back up the chain. Enemy headquarters well-appointed, deeply dug in, but inflexible. It's not a condemnation, just an observation. Still, the words carry weight. Inside one command room, a lieutenant finds a detailed timetable. 4 artillery support air cover scheduled, counterattacks planned. All of it assumes the Germans still control Q crossroads. They don't. Haven't for days. The bunker, for all its comfort, is blind. You could feel the irony pressing in. German officers had sheltered themselves from the battlefield so completely that, when chaos erupted above, they were among the last to feel it. By the time the roar of Allied armor reached their doors, escape routes were already gone, and when they fled fast. In one sleeping area, British troops find personal belongings scattered in haste. A half-packed suitcase, a pair of polished boots left behind, a letter never finished. The luxury didn't make them braver. It made them slower. Outside, the reality is brutal. German infantry trying to escape the pocket march through open fields under constant attack. No bunkers, no heaters, no carpets. Just dust, fear, and the sky itself turning against them. Allied fighter bombers strike with near impunity. Rockets ripping apart columns that have nowhere left to run. The contrast is stark. Underground comfort. Above ground catastrophe. British soldiers begin to understand that these bunkers were not symbols of superiority. They were symptoms of a fractured system. One where protection flowed upward, insulating command while frontline troops paid the price. That realization changes how the enemy is seen. Not as an unstoppable machine, not as a perfectly coordinated force, but as an army already cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. One sergeant sums it up while standing at the bunker entrance, looking out toward the burning roads. All that concrete, he says, didn't save them in the end. The men nod, quietly, because now they see it clearly. These bunkers weren't built for victory. They were built for survival, specifically the survival of those who believed the war could be managed from a desk underground. But war doesn't stay where you plan it. As the 11th Armored Division pushes on, resistance stiffens briefly, then collapses entirely. The pocket closes. Thousands of German soldiers are killed or captured. Equipment is abandoned. Units disintegrate. In behind them. They leave their hidden world behind. The bunkers will remain sealed and forgotten in the French countryside. Concrete tombs of a strategy that mistook comfort for control. But for the British soldiers who walked those carpeted corridors, the memory sticks. Because in that moment, standing in warmth while the war burned above, they saw the truth of the enemy more clearly than any intelligence report could reveal. And it raises one final, unsettling question. If the Germans believed concrete could save them here, what else did they build elsewhere to hide from a war they were already losing? The answer lies beyond Normandy. The road east is littered with debris, burned out half-tracks, overturned wagons, helmets crushed into the mud by tank treads. As the British advance beyond the Falaise pocket, the landscape itself seems to testify against the enemy. This is not a fighting withdrawal. It's a collapse. And yet every few miles there's another bunker. Hidden entrances cut into hillsides. Steel doors bent inward. Camouflage netting sagging uselessly now that the war has moved on. The pattern repeats. And with it, a realization grows sharper with every discovery. These weren't isolated comforts. They were part of a worldview. British intelligence officers begin documenting the bunkers systematically. Floor plans, supply lists, communications layouts. What emerges is a picture of an army that invested enormous effort into creating islands of order beneath a battlefield defined by chaos. You could almost feel the mentality behind it. If the war above becomes below, if artillery falls weighted out, if the front shifts, hold position and trust the plan. But Normandy was not the kind of war these bunkers were built for. The Allied advance moved with a speed the German command structure could not match. Armor columns punched through weak points. Infantry followed hard. Air power shredded anything that tried to move in daylight. There was no time for carefully coordinated counterattacks planned from underground rooms. And so the bunkers became obsolete the moment they were needed most. Inside one abandoned command post near Argentan, British officers find a chalkboard message written in German. Hold until relieved. No date. No signature. Relief never came. The bunker's occupants had trusted a system that had already failed them. The maps on the wall still showed defensive lines that were overrun days earlier. The radio logs end abruptly, mid-transmission. Somewhere above, the front dissolved. And the men below didn't realize it until it was too late. This is where understanding deepens. The luxury wasn't arrogance, it was distance. Distance from mud, from exhaustion, from fear. German officers had been trained to believe that command efficiency required insulation. That clear thinking demanded separation from the immediate horrors of combat. In theory, it made sense. In practice, it created a fatal disconnect. British officers noticed the difference immediately. Their own command posts are closer to the front, more exposed, more uncomfortable, but they're also more responsive. When the battlefield changes, they feel it instantly. In Normandy, that difference mattered. A major from the Royal Armoured Corps remarks to a correspondent. They fought from below ground. We fought from the field. That's why we knew when to move. The bunkers had protected German commanders from shells, but they had also blinded them to reality. And now, as prisoners are taken in the thousands, the contrast becomes painfully human. Captured German soldiers, young, filthy, exhausted, stare in disbelief when British troops mention the bunkers. Many had never seen them, never benefited from them. Some didn't even know they existed. The resentment is visible. One prisoner, barely 20, gestures back toward the hills. The officers stayed there, he says bitterly. We stayed in the open. The bunkers were never meant for everyone. They were a privilege, a hierarchy carved into concrete. And that hierarchy fractured the army from within. As the campaign continues into late summer, Allied troops will encounter similar underground facilities in Belgium and Germany itself. Each one reinforces the same lesson. The enemy had prepared extensively to endure but not to adapt. Comfort replaced flexibility. Protection replaced awareness. Concrete replaced movement. And against an opponent defined by speed, coordination, and overwhelming air power. That trade-off proved fatal, standing at the entrance of yet another abandoned bunker. A British officer pauses before ordering it sealed. He looks back one last time at the warm, empty rooms. All that effort, he says quietly, for nothing. But it wasn't for nothing. Because what these bunkers truly reveal is not German strength but German fear. A belief that the war could be survived if only one hid deep enough, built strong enough, insulated thoroughly enough from the chaos above. Normandy proved that belief wrong. The war does not respect walls. It does not wait for plans. and it does not spare those who mistake shelter for control. As the British move on, leaving the bunkers to darkness and silence, one truth remains clear. The enemy didn't just lose the battle above ground, they lost it below ground, too. And the men who discovered these hidden fortresses will never look at the war of their enemy the same way again. Weeks later, the war has moved on. The guns are farther east now. Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany itself looming on the horizon. But among the men of the 11th Armored Division, the memory of Normandy's hidden bunkers lingers like a half-dream, too strange to ignore, too vivid to dismiss. Around cook fires and inside troop carriers, the stories resurface. Remember that place with the carpet? The one with the radio playing music? Felt like a bloody hotel. That did they laugh when they tell it? They always do. But the laughter is thin, edged with something else, something harder to name. You can almost feel it when the stories are told. Not envy, not quite anger. It's perspective. Those bunkers became a symbol not of German power, but of the illusion that power could be engineered underground. They represented everything the enemy had believed. That concrete could compensate for lost initiative. That insulation could replace adaptability. That comfort could coexist with total war. For British soldiers, the discovery sharpened an understanding they had already earned the hard way. War is not fought in ideal conditions. It is fought in rain, mud, confusion, and exhaustion. And the side that accepts that reality tends to survive it. The bunkers were impressive. No one denies that. Technically brilliant. Meticulously planned. But they also revealed a truth that Allied troops instinctively recognized. You cannot manage a fluid war from a fixed place. Normandy had proven that beyond doubt. Years later, veterans would still mention those underground rooms in interviews and letters. They described the surreal feeling of stepping out of a rain-soaked battlefield into warmth and light, of realizing that the enemy so feared, so formidable, had been fighting a different kind of war entirely. One veteran would later say, "That's when I stopped thinking of them as invincible." That moment matters, because wars are won not just with weapons, but with belief. Belief in adaptability, in resilience, in facing reality hidden, rather than hiding from it. The German bunkers, for all their luxury, were built on a misunderstanding of that truth. They assumed the war could be endured. The Allies fought it to be finished. As the final months of the conflict unfold, that difference becomes decisive. The German army continues to rely on fixed defenses, the Siegfried Line, fortified cities, underground headquarters, while Allied forces maneuver around, through, and over them. By the time British troops cross into Germany, the bunkers no longer shock them. They recognize them for what they are, remnants of a strategy already defeated. The real surprise of Normandy wasn't the wine or the carpets. It was the realization that the enemy's greatest peaks investments had been made in places that no longer mattered. And that realization gave tired men something invaluable: confidence. Because once you see that your enemy has been preparing for the wrong war, the outcome begins to feel inevitable. The bunkers fade into the past as the division drives forward, but the lesson stays with the men who found them. Long after the concrete rooms fill with dust and silence, they learned that victory doesn't belong to those who hide best. It belongs to those who adapt fastest. And in the end, that made all the difference.